So in my render settings, let's start with the common tab that's common to 3 Studio Max and any other render engine. This is where you define if it's a single frame, so one image, or a video. You also have here the custom size. So if I actually change this, you'll see how it changed my save frames. In case you don't remember, this is here on show save frames. Okay, so for example, if I take here and put a 300, it's going to be a lot more elongated. Okay. I also have this output file, but this makes sense only if I'm going to render with 3D Max. So I will show you where is it in Vray. Here we have the assign render. I could actually pick the renders I want for every single thing and then save it as default. Right now in the material editor I have Vray because if the render engine I use actually use their own materials, like the case of Vray, then you have to make sure that they appear in the material editor. So in the Vray tab is where we're going to do most of the things. We have the Vray frame buffer. Okay, and here we have something interesting that says get resolution from max. This, as you see grayed out, is the size of the frame buffer. And because it's getting the resolution from max, it's taking into account what we set here on the common tab. This has its advantage and disadvantage. When I set a huge image here, then it's going to take a little bit more RAM, and this is because it calculates first the window frame in max and then it shows it on Vray. Okay, so what I can do is set my image here, okay, and then copy the resolution the way I want it into the Vray frame buffer window. Why do I say that? Because right now if I would change this, actually if you see, the original one is 800 by 500 and this one is 600 by 480, 640 and 480, and you don't see this viewport changing, okay, and this is actually the disadvantage. As you can see, I have my image aspect and pixel aspect. You also have it here and I can lock it. So my image aspect right now is 1.6. If I would put here an 800, it would go to 1. Okay, so basically it's the proportion. And the pixel aspect is something similar to what you have in videos. And if I leave it in 1, it means my pixel is a square pixel, okay? So I can just lock those, okay? And as I said, first figure out the size of your image here, and then copy it to your Vray frame buffer if you are rendering a large image, okay? So we are gonna leave it on get resolution from max for the moment. Right under this, we have two interesting checks, and it's the Vray raw image and the separate render channels. So the render channels are the render elements or render passes, okay? And what I do here is that I check this, look for a place to save them, and so let's say I'm just gonna render it here in a scene assets, whatever. And by default, it uses this Vray image file format, but I'm gonna pick on the OpenEXR, which is an image that I can use to save 32 float images. And also it's interesting because if I have the plugin for Photoshop or also in After Effects and certainly in Nuke, I can it holds all the information of all my different separate render elements in it, and I can have them as layers or sometimes loaded as separate channels. And so I'm going to uncheck it right now because otherwise every time I render, it's going to ask me to rewrite the image, okay? In the case of Photoshop, I already uploaded on the resources a plugin to install the Photoshop plugin for opening EXR images. And here is to save my render channel. So again, check, and then I just save the path, and it's going to save all my render channels automatically. Okay, it has here save alpha and RGB. RGB would be the original image as you would have it without the render process. I'm also going to uncheck it so that it doesn't keep asking me to rewrite it. So I'm going to close this one now, and in global switches we have something interesting as well. Is this override material. So if I check on it and I pick a material, I can also just drag it. Okay, I can set it to be this material. So actually let's render first my scene. Okay, so this is my original image. Okay, and what if I want to just test the light? Then I open, sorry, I had it open before. So here in the global switches, I have this override material, and I can just drag a material. Let's say that's actually the wall. Let's create a new material. Okay, and let's test my light with, actually this is perfect, it's a middle gray, and we do it that way because this would be the equivalent of 50% gray, which is what, it's this little card that sometimes photographers in analog photography used to use because it's supposed to be a value similar to the skin color. Okay, so if this gray is properly exposed, then almost the whole scene is properly exposed. Okay, so now I'm going to drag this material to my default material, and if I render again, okay, actually it replaced every single material for this gray. Okay, and now I can evaluate how my light is working without being influenced by the reflections or a specific color bleeding. Okay, I'm going to take it out again. Actually, first I'm going to clear it out. Okay, and now it goes back to what I had before. That would be the better way. Yes, exactly. And so if I continue with the other tabs, here, as you can see, you have this default. These are the default settings. If you want to have more setups, then you have to open it in advance. Basically, in global switches, it takes into account everything that is going on in the software. So if I take out displacement, there is not going to calculate any displacement, or if I take out lights, it's not going to calculate any light. Okay, so I'm going to put it back in default, which allows me for the override material, which is right now all I want. Let's go into my image sampler. I'm going to open it to advanced. And as you can see, it says anti-aliasing. I already explained in class anti-aliasing, and you can for sure check it online. Okay, basically, if I render this, I'm going to render just this region. Okay, anti-aliasing is that the software considers this object on the wall different objects, and it does this in between pixel color to show a softer line, because otherwise you will see this jagged line here. Okay, so in the image sampler is where I control my anti-aliasing, and I'm going to stop right now the software, the rendering, and I can set it by bucket or progressive. I'll just render it by bucket so that you see the difference. It's not really so different anymore, but you see these buckets now. Okay, so this was actually the old way, or the way it was always before in Vray. So let's go back to progressive, and in the image sampler I have a really interesting option. So I'm actually going to render the whole scene. Okay, let's assume this is a Holocene because otherwise it was going to take too long. And I want to test a different color for this ball, okay? And I do that with the render mask. So I will apply a different material to the ball there. I don't see it here because I haven't rendered again. And by the way, this only works in the production mode, not in the iterative one. And so right now I said render mask just the selected object. So if I render now, it's just going to render that object in the new color. Okay, and this is great because I can evaluate different materials. You can obviously see here what's the problem, and it's that I still have some red bleeding here, but if the material is quite similar, it's a great option, because maybe it's just the size of the map, and I'm just changing it a little bit, and the color doesn't really change, and I don't have to render the whole scene, okay? On the other hand, if I clear right now the image I have there, okay, and I render this again, still in the selected option, it's just going to render my image, and it's also going to create an alpha to take that out. Okay, and we have a similar option in the render elements, but if you don't want to create a render element, this is a great option for that. So I'm going to put it in none again. Okay, and I'm actually going to stop this, make it iterative, and then apply again my red ball. Okay, and there it's updating. So regarding the settings of the image sampler, the way the settings are right now by default works for almost every image, and I cannot tell you about a universal value because it really depends on your image, okay? And all the settings are in the Vray documentation for you to tweak them depending of what you need, okay? The settings by default are actually very heavy. So if you tweak them, it's usually because you want faster render times.